Let's learn about this company that once rivaled Heinz, but now is almost forgotten, on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. Our story begins with two brothers, Simeon, born in 1839, and Edgar, born in 1844 in New York. Apparently, the older brother Simeon started in the grocer business. The first time I see him show up in the directory is in 1866 as a grocer, and he's 27 at this point. Now Edgar is a clerk somewhere, and this guy Mark is their dad. Now Edgar joins the business after a couple years, thus changing the name of the company to Curtice Brothers. A few years after that, they sold their grocery store because they were actually really interested in preserving and canning fruits and vegetables. So they started a new canning business in 1868. As time went on, they eventually added items such as canned meats and soups. Here in 1870, Simeon, Edgar, and their sister Delia are living together. Notice Delia is a principal. Now the address is 11 CO. Well, there's not an 11 anymore, but it could be this building. Here in 1871, the city of Rochester is announcing that a 4-story brick building was being built to accommodate the Curtice Brothers canning business. It says they just started business 3 years ago, and it says the building is 40 feet by 130 feet brick. Now, we're looking down Water Street right now, and I've gone up and down this street and I don't see a 4-story building. Anyways, the article says that they employ about 65 hands, and 200 bushels of cherries are handled each day in this building. It says after cherry season, they will start on lima beans, string beans, peas, tomatoes, corn, plums, pears, and quinces. I had to look up what a quince is. It says it's kind of like an apple, pear, and citrus. Anyways, in 1874, they are already selling this brick building. I guess they grew out of it already. According to this directory in 1876, they moved down the street, still on Water Street. But I don't have a description of this building, so I don't know if it's still standing or not. In 1879, this talks about how this firm called Crabb & Son came up with a machine that effectively separates tomato seeds, flesh, and skins, and they're currently selling their crushed tomato pulp to the Curtice Brothers, who, they say, prepare a very excellent tomato ketchup, for which they deserve worldwide reputation. Also, in 1879, tinsmiths wanted. In 1880, Simeon married Christine, and they had a daughter, Grace Christine. Unfortunately, his wife would die before Grace turned 1. Simeon's sister, Delia, helped him raise Grace. I think he lived out the rest of his life with his sister Delia living with him. Delia never married or had kids. A few years later, Edgar married Lucy. She was married before and had 3 kids, and he adopted them. In 1885, here's an ad for some goods that the Curtice Brothers produce that you might want for your holiday dinner. Almost 20 years after being in business, in 1887, they incorporated. Simeon is president, Edgar is vice president, and there's a Chauncey M. Curtice here, which is a nephew. In 1888, we see some patents being issued, including one for the Curtice Brothers for a can top design. Now skip ahead 10 years. Simeon is recovering from a severe illness. In 1899, some ads for some of their products, including Blue Label soups, and they're 18 cents a can. Now we were just looking at this one a few minutes ago. This is the 1900 census showing Simeon, his sister Delia, and Grace is 16 now, along with a teacher, 2 servants, a coachman, and a butler listed at the home. This 1900 ad shows a few more products we didn't know before, such as baked beans, ketchup, potted chicken, potted game, and potted ham. By this time, the Curtice Brothers were one of the top 3 ketchup producers in the country, competing with Heinz and T.A. Snyder as the top manufacturer. In 1901, the headline says $1.5 million corporation. It mentions that they have 2 big factories, one also in Vernon, New York. It mentions they have 2 corporations, Curtice Brothers Company and Curtice Canning Company, and this is the amount of the 2 of them combined. Some wanted ads. Here we're looking for 50 girls for the labeling department and 200 women to peel and trim apples. In 1903, Delia died. Grace is 20 now, and super beautiful. 1905, though, was a pretty rough year. Simeon died at the age of 65 in February. A few months later, in June, Edgar's son, Edgar Jr., also died. He was only 27. And right after that, in August, Edgar's wife, Lucy, died. Simeon's obituary mentions that Simeon had been president for its entire existence, 37 years. They say he devoted himself so completely to the business that it cost him his health. It says, "We can testify not only to his ability in business, but also his integrity as a man and his unfailing courtesy to friends and acquaintances." It mentions here that the amount transferred to Grace was over $57,000. So Edgar becomes president of the company. Edgar also becomes a director on the board of the National Bank of Rochester. In 1910, a cottage that Simeon had built on the beach, which Grace was staying in, had caught fire and couldn't be saved. In 1913, Edgar is president and treasurer of the company. Sources say that Grace was also involved with running the company, but I don't see her listed anywhere. Not much change in 1919, and I don't see the nephew anymore, so I don't know where he went. Here in 1919, a wanted ad needs more girls for the labeling department, promising $2.25 and upwards a day, guaranteed. In 1920, we see Edgar, and his daughter's family lives with him, along with 3 servants. It shows his son-in-law is a superintendent at the canning company, but a few months later, Edgar dies at the age of 75. It says, "Death came to him with short warning, and he died while in the fullness of his powers and activities. Apparently he became ill Tuesday after lunch, and doctors weren't sure what was wrong with him, but he got worse, and the next morning he died." His obituary says he took interest in fine horses and owned a good number of them, and was an excellent horseman. It says it pained him to give them up whenever the modern technology brought in the automobile. It says he was one of the last people in the city to buy a car. In 1921, a guy named Robert Badger is president of the company. The son-in-law is still keeping his job, it seems. In 1922, an ad for the Curtice Brothers plum pudding, jams, and jellies. In 1925, it says that both Curtice Brothers have been dead for several years now, but the exceptional standards of excellence had been so thoroughly instilled in the present organization. It goes on to say that the president is now a Douglas Townsend. The son-in-law is still there, but from what I can tell, the family is no longer running the business. In 1933, a case against the company by a guy who raised a 5-acre crop of tomatoes that the company said that they would pay $750 for, but when it was delivered, they refused to take it or pay for it. So the grower won the case. In 1941, Grace died at the age of 57. And in 1946, the company moves again. Apparently they were on 20 Curtice Street, which doesn't seem to exist anymore, but there is a Curtice Road, and it looks like it's a residential road. They mention the new location is on Buffalo Road, which is west of Mount Read Boulevard, and I can find these 2 roads, but they don't intersect anymore. In 1956, the company gets a new president, and here's a look into the facilities in 1958. In 1961, Profac bought the 93-year-old company for $93 million. They continued production, but that seems to be the end of the Curtice Brothers name. It was later known as Curtice Burns, and this is as late as 1992, but it looks like Bird's Eye Foods bought it in 1994. So the Curtice Brothers have been dissolved since 1961. So almost 10 years ago, these guys in the UK decided to start making good, healthy, organic ketchup. Now these guys are not related to each other or the Curtice Brothers. They just had the same vision of excellence, and this is what they said on their website. "Without any particular intention, we followed this nostalgic reference and found that this brand, with its very romantic touch, had been abandoned. So we decided to continue their story, and we became the new Curtice Brothers." So, I went looking for examples of this vintage ketchup bottle, and I found a few examples, but I found very few that look like mine with the Curtice Brothers monogram on the front. Most have this design, which is what I think most of the ads use. I think this bottle's blown, or really early machine made. It's got a ridged body, and you can see the stretch marks from the glass being pulled up for the neck. It's got a screw top, which I wonder if that's one of the patented designs that they came up with back in 1888, because this is still a little early for screw tops. I would probably date this one between 1900 and 1920. By the way, the new Curtice Brothers use that same old monogram on their bottles. And that's going to do it for us today, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.